Welcome to the course on hierarchical and multivariate data, which is co-taught by Christel Vaas, Geert Verbeke and myself, Geert Molenbergs, each for different parts of the course. The course also forms a unity with Discovering Associations, the project. So, all together, we will be looking at data that are other than univariate data. That's it. So, classical linear models, analysis of variance, logistic regression, Poisson regression, etc. All these things, all these tools that we know for univariate outcomes will somehow have to be either replaced or extended in case there are hierarchies in the data. And what we mean by that, I will explain in the first few chapters of the course, after which we move in the more technical material. So, the course, as I said, after the introductory material, where we introduce not only examples, but also some common tools used throughout the various application areas. After having done that, the second part, Christel's part, is about multivariate methodology. Then part 3 is about repeated measures, longitudinal data, and what that is we will define in due course, but focusing on continuous, that means Gaussian, normally distributed in other words, outcomes, whereas part 4, cluster data, is also about outcomes that are, for example, of a binary type. So, in the first part, introductory materials, in chapter 1, I will do nothing more but point you to some background reading. And we should be very clear on the status of background reading. It's not the idea that you read all these books from cover to cover, that you buy all of them, etc. No, I'm just going through a mini library, as it were, that surrounds the course, and some of those books were actually sources of inspiration of what we deal with in the course. The book by Arts et al. Is about cluster data. It's maybe not a surprise that the last part on cluster data is somehow related to some material that has been covered in this course. The focus in that book is on binary data and especially also on risk assessment. Davidian and Giltinen is an interesting book for those people who want at one point to go beyond what is covered in this course, i.e. when we deal with nonlinear models. So to be very clear, the course will not deal with nonlinear models, but just to know there is more out there than what we can cover in the course, of course. So just to know where we could go from here, that is covered in this particular course. Then we have Diggle, Haggerty, Liang, and Ziegler, a book that provides a broad overview on the field of repeated measures, including continuous and non-continuous repeated measures. So that book is sometimes relevant as background reading for the later parts of the course, not really the multivariate part. Farmeyer and Toots is a book on non-Gaussian, so non-normally distributed outcomes, binary or any other type, both multivariate and repeated measures. It's a useful book in the sense that it contains a catalog of methods that can be used, methods that are described and illustrated, but without being discussed in each and every possible detail. So that book is a little bit encyclopedic, and by encyclopedic, I mean if you want to have quick access to a certain method. Let's name one that we will not cover in this course, but anyway, the Bahadur model, we will cover it very briefly. Well, the Bahadur model is discussed in the book by Farmeyer and Toots. He may, or they may have a number of models that you will find not easily elsewhere. So it's complete, but it's not like deep in every aspect of those models. Fitzmaurice, Davidian, Verbeke, and Molenbergs is a book dealing with longitudinal data, but more at a research level. So In other words, in 2009, when the book came out, if the question is, what is now the state of the art and what are the hot topics at this point, you will find a collection of them discussed in that book by a number of people, not only by the 4 authors or editors, I should say, of the book, but also by a number of people who were invited to contribute. Johnson and Witchern has been the basis of the multivariate part of the course to a large extent, and is a very didactic book on multivariate methods. You shouldn't maybe read it if you're really looking for an exciting novel. That's not what it is. But if you want a clear, precise, easy to follow, notationally correct introduction to a certain topic, you will find it there. It's more about thoroughness, completeness, the pedagogical and the didactic sides of it, rather than being fully complete about every model or method that you can think of for multivariate data. So there are multivariate methods not covered in Johnson and Witchern. You may find them in return in the book by Krzanovsky, which is a little bit like Farmeyer and Tutz, a very broad, complete overview of almost every classical technique there is in multivariate data, but without focusing so much on, let's say, exercises, very careful development. The book is carefully developed, no problem with that, but it's more like an encyclopedic text. McCullough and Nelder is like ever so often when you deal with repeated measures, there is a univariate basis, a univariate core foundation on which everything else is built. You cannot build a building on quicksand. You need to give it a solid foundation. And that's the linear model and the generalized linear model. And the generalized linear model is what McCullough and Nelder discuss. Then we have the book by Mike Kenworth and I about missing data. For those people who at one point would like to look already a little bit into missing data, but that's covered more in courses like Project Incomplete Data and Longitudinal Data Analysis for later, or at least outside of this course. The books by Geert Verbeke and me on linear and nonlinear mixed effects models, or generalized linear mixed effects models, generalized estimating equations, the 2 that I've indicated now, they form the foundation of the 2 parts of the course, if I can call it that way, on Gaussian and also on non-Gaussian repeated measures. Not on multivariate methods. For that we have Johnson and Witchern and Krzanovsky. And then, just for the record, Pinheiro and Bates is now a somewhat older book. More texts have become available, but where mixed effects models are discussed from an S and an S plus perspective. Nowadays we would say R, and a lot of the S plus code still is exactly the same when you translate that to R code. Okay, that was a bit of background on the rest of the course, and we are now indeed ready to move into the rest of part 1. As I said, chapter 2 will introduce key examples and the typical questions surrounding it, like what is it all about if you talk about multivariate data? What is it all about if you talk about repeated measures? That's what you will get in chapter 2, and then some useful background notation, terminology, a few key theorems, etc. will be discussed in chapter 3.